Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to the Attic. It's time for another voicemail. Today's voicemail is from an anonymous caller. Let's listen to what they have to say.
Hey, Lloyd. So I'll cut right to the chase. About 3.5 years ago, I started to have some pretty serious doubts about the organization. And these kept growing. And as the older I got, and the more critically I was able to look at these issues, the classic issues like prophecies, especially 1914, the Paradise Promise, the obvious authoritarian nature of the cult, and the like, just kind of got me to accept that this really isn't it. Despite trying to give the organization as many chances as possible, they kind of fall flat every single time I apply some critical thinking and scrutiny to it. So I'm at a point right now in which I am excelling in my academic extracurriculars and my classes, and it feels like I've found almost like my calling, right? I had to convince my parents for months to let me go to a public high school because I've been homeschooled my entire life, and about 2 years ago that finally was granted, and it felt like a large part of me was finally fulfilled at that point. However, it's starting to come under a pretty serious threat. My parents recently took away all my academic extracurriculars because they thought that they were impeding on my spiritual health and routine too much, which is disappointing to say the least, because these are my passions. These are the things that I found myself in. When I was in a dark place, I was able to use these in order to kind of fill myself in. And now they're most likely going to be gone by the time school starts again. Furthermore, I'm even catching wind that they might even want to take me out of public high school altogether, especially if they start to catch wind more and more of my disbeliefs, which are being let slip more recently. So if this happens, obviously that is like, I guess, world shattering for me, because this is what I've built everything around, because I've always had academic hobbies. I didn't really have hobbies on anything else. And now they might be, as they've grown, they might be stripped away, right? So I feel like I'm trapped like in a cave, and whenever I try to move around or make a play for more independence or to feel a little bit of freedom, it gets a bit tighter, and I'm at a point where I think that this is almost a hinge, and if a couple more bad things happen with good succession, then I might just have everything taken away, right? And that is a non-option for me. So if I were to sum it up, I think that my parents are inadvertently ruining my future prospects, because I'm set up pretty well right now and I'm happy right now, but that might be taken away. So I think that they are inadvertently sabotaging my future, and I feel trapped. So I guess if I had to have one question to give to you specifically, it would be, if you woke up way earlier in my shoes, around 16, and you had to make a decision when you have this impeding pressure coming on you, what would you do? Right? Would you cut ties with everyone, get emancipated, and try to live your own life near homeless and finally able to pursue your hobbies and your interests to the full extent? Or do you just double down and become completely subservient to your parents and their religion in order to try to get by for a couple more years until you can leave? Or are you doing something in between? I'd really like some insight here from someone as, I know, well-versed as you in this subject. And yeah, just kind of get your thoughts on it. And of course, I'd like to remain anonymous for reasons. You can use this on a video as much as you'd like. I'd love to hear it. But yeah, I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much for this message. And quick disclaimer, I have a rule on this channel that I don't have interview guests, or I don't do voicemails from people below the age of 18. I think the reasons for that are fairly obvious. I want to have all of my content with people who are of the age of consent, where they're old enough to know what they're doing, and they're old enough to, take responsibility for their actions, basically. And I have reason to suspect that you might be younger than 18, but you haven't expressly stated that. And also, you've kept yourself anonymous. You haven't mentioned your name. Now, obviously, with a bit of sleuthing, someone who knows you might recognize your voice or track you down or whatever. But I feel that given the gravity of your situation, and again, the fact that you've not stated your name, and there is some degree of plausible deniability if anyone were to recognize your voice, I think it's important to actually play this message because it not only does it highlight the situation that many young Jehovah's Witnesses find themselves in, where their parents, either inadvertently or otherwise, actively sabotage their children's future by interfering with their education. In your case, you've already spent a number of years being homeschooled, and now it's looking like as your education reaches its climax, you're under threat of being pulled out of school again, having already been robbed of your extracurricular activities, which it sounds like were really important to you. So it's important to let people know that this is a very real situation that people are facing, that young people are facing. And second of all, I guess I wanted to give my viewers an opportunity to maybe come to the rescue here, because I did interview someone on the channel some time ago now, named Moss. Thumbnail here if Tibor is gracious. And Moss found themselves in a similar situation where they had to be very, very strategic about getting out of the organization, and they had outside help, or they had help from people in their community who were in a position to do something. And so what I'm thinking is, by playing your message, maybe people can reach out to the channel who might be in a position to help you, and we can forward on emails. Now, here's where it gets tricky. You want to be very careful about whose offers of help you respond to, because who knows, maybe it could be Jehovah's Witnesses trying to surreptitiously find out who you are, or it could be someone who's otherwise trying to take advantage of your situation. So you have to be super, super careful. But for the record, if anyone listening to this message is in a position to help this person, then the email address to use is, and Tibor can maybe put it on the screen, is jwwatchorg@gmail.com. I do have this person's email address, so any emails that you send through to the channel that are offering help, we will just forward them on, unless it sounds overtly like it's someone trolling or like they have suspicious motives. We'll just send them straight on to this individual, and maybe we might be able to facilitate a good outcome here. But having said all of that, you asked me a straightforward question of, what would you do in this situation? If you could speak to yourself at my age, in this situation, what would your advice be? Well, look, I think, or I like to think, it's not as simple as you being homeless and destitute and out on the streets, or being in this situation where you are with parents who are sabotaging your future. I like to think, maybe I'm just being overly optimistic, but I like to think it's a little bit more complicated than that, because you do sound like you're at an age where you can at least represent yourself very eloquently and coherently. And if I were in your position, my first port of call would be, number one, your school counselor. So I would be getting an appointment with your school counselor and saying, here's the situation I find myself in. I want to be in school, but for religious reasons, I feel as though my parents might be trying to pull me out of school. So what are my options? Is there any legal recourse for someone of my age to be able to stay in school if that's what I passionately want? So you could try your school counselor and just see what advice they have. Another option might be social services in your area. I don't know which state or even, quite frankly, which country you're in. But it could be that there are some social services where you can arrange an appointment and you can, again, explain your situation. Ultimately, if you are below the age of 18, which you might be, your options are always going to be limited because your parents have a legal right to determine your education and various other things. But I don't know, I just like to think that there might be some options here, especially given how eloquently and passionately and convincingly you've explained your situation in this voicemail. Basically, have that conversation with a school counselor and just see what happens. And I like to think that either something might happen in that direction or with social services, or perhaps, again, my viewers can come riding to the rescue and we can forward on some emails, and maybe, especially if it's someone kind of in your area who's in a position to, I don't know, take over being your legal guardian. I know that there are some circumstances in which that can happen. Who knows? Maybe there's a way through this. But whatever happens, do not give up hope. Do not give up hope. You sound like a bright young person with a phenomenal future ahead of you. And this is just a temporary setback, okay? So you've already won the lottery in figuring out in the last 3.5 years that you were being raised in a cult and that you were being lied to. So many viewers listening to this message will be thinking, God, I wish that was me. I wish I'd figured it out when I was as young as this dude, you know? So you've already won the lottery there. And what you have right now, as upsetting and perhaps even distressing as it may be, what you have is a temporary setback. And ultimately, if you have a dream, if you have a vision for where you want to be in the future, and you have an area or a skill or a career in which you want to be successful, you go for it and you will attain it. I'm a firm believer in that. It's just purely about how badly you want it. So don't feel down. I hope, if nothing else, my reply to you has given you a little bit more reason for optimism. Do try to pursue whatever avenues might be open to you through your school or through the local social services. Just see where things take you if you sit down and have some conversations with people whose job it is to help young people in situations like yours. And please, as well, keep in touch. Again, I have your email, so we will be emailing you and hopefully passing on emails from viewers. But let's keep in touch. And I'd really like to know how this situation resolves itself, but I have a feeling you're going to be okay. So that's really all I have time for. I hope you've enjoyed my response or found it in any way helpful. Don't forget that if you'd like to leave a voicemail, the thing to do is go to speakpipe.com/Cedars, remembering to indicate clearly if you don't want me to broadcast your message on this channel. But that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for watching.